Tonight's topic is gender in Judaism, the real issue. Okay, so what I want to do is really trying to analyze what are the fundamentals of the issue, because in many ways I think there are two things that occur. First of all, how the issue is defined is usually problematic. I find this a lot with a lot of Torah issues, that what happens is people hear a concept and then simplistic perceptions are applied. And when those simplistic perceptions are applied, you can get some, ridiculous results ad absurdum. So, for example, the way most people explain sneas and the whole concept of sneas, the next logical conclusion is the burqa. And now I was reading something else where now women are covering their faces, and then I read somewhere else where a wife tells her husband to stay in the base register till 11:30 to make sure that their 12-year-old daughter goes to sleep before he comes home and stuff like that, all in the name of sneas. And what's occurring is that there is simply a lack of simplistic presentation on sneas, and you get the results ad absurdum.
The extrapolations are awful.
Right.
And there already exists sects of women in Israel, a sect of women in Israel who are wearing burqas.
Right, but the question is, then how do you redefine sneas? How do you define sneas in such a way that you don't end up with it? That means it's a much more complex definition. You have this with like I saw this also in terms of some videos I saw. Somehow I saw a video on YouTube about covering your hair, and the simplistic arguments for covering your hair are such that to me it's like fingernails on the chalkboard, because it sounds sort of like totally missing the point and whatever it is. And I find this comes out in so many different areas in Jewish thought. Or not just in colloquial Judaism, that people, they plug into something, they do it, they hear this simplistic explanation and so forth and so forth, and all of a sudden people buy it, because usually it's simple and they can use it and you don't have to think about it, and it's the kind of thing you can throw out to anyone. Oh yeah, sure, but then you can see in their own lives that they're really not applying it. Yeah.
It's the third thing you said. You don't have to think about it.
Right.
You do have to think about it.
But the fact is that I'll try and give another example.
I've got a bigger question.
Yeah. Okay. Let me hear.
Okay. So I am not in any way demonizing any outreach movement, because I do believe that practice of Judaism by more and more Jews, and by Judaism I mean basic tenets that we would call at least modern Orthodox, to the right. We'll see how far we stretch with that before we go into darker territory, as it were. I am a BT myself, but from a whole different way, not through outreach. This was a boyfriend and a decision, and then conscious learning through time. So my approach is different automatically than anyone's who has been brought in through an outreach movement. What I understand, though, from those beginnings is that yes, people are given much more black and white when there's gray.
Right.
And it's harder to do the gray, because it's harder on those who have to know that there's gray and then learn and apply it to the individual circumstance, which is what should be done in any case, as I understand it. And then you get people practicing, but it's surface. And where does it go deeper?
It's interesting how you define deeper. What happens is that
like, I look at it as blind acceptance out of the need
right,
and a practice that's essentially good.
The depth is a different. I wouldn't use the word depth. It's a breadth. But what happens is that there's a perception of something that seems to be correct or whatever, and you can't have any of the challenges. Let's say, for an example, faith healing. Okay. So all of a sudden you hear some kind of faith healing by someone. It was a nace, and this person did it, and so forth and so forth. So then you go read literature, you find out about this faith healer there, and that faith healer there, and that religion, and this religion, and over. So the only answer that person has is they're all liars, we're the only truth. So everyone else is charlatan, and that's the only answer you have. The problem is that all the battle comes down to is who's lying. No.
Right.
You're the liar. No, you're the liar. So there's no discussion, in terms of, and then you have the answer is, well, no, it was psychologically for that person. You see, but this is a real thing. What occurs is I'm right and I'm real, and those guys are the charlatans, or those guys are the psychological things, without actually looking at what really is going on. And if you're going to express that over there, in other words, it's like the classic joke: you shoot the arrow, then you draw the bullseye around it afterwards. And a lot of times that's what happens in order to maintain the perception, rather than dealing with the real depth of the situation and the real issues involved. Like, hear about this miracle, not that. This person was saved, and that person. Well, let me ask you something. If this rabbi could do a miracle in that case, how come he didn't do a miracle in the next bed over? You know what I mean? Here, this rabbi saved this person. Okay, thank you very much. Why didn't he save the person next door? Why didn't he save another life?
I've heard simple answers to something like that.
Right. So
not mina shemayim,
Right. Well, okay. So the point is that you're dealing with a lot of what's happening is you're dealing with a specific. You see, what happens with depth is depth makes the situation not so black and white.
Exactly.
It makes the situation not so perfect. It makes the situation like it's a little bit more hazy and more difficult with all the factors and so forth and so forth. It's like I remember in economics when I was they had a concept called the multiplier concept, based on the marginal propensity consumed. So if, let's say, people consume, let's say, 75% of whatever money they make. So if you spend $1, it will come out to be something like $3 will be affected in. Have a little multiplier concept will have a tremendous amount of multiplier effect. But in actual economics, the actual effect, when the mathematics shows it could be a multiplier effect, could be 8 times as much. The actual effect, because of all the weaknesses in the economy, so that comes out to like 1.62%. So you have this remarkable theoretical figure when you just do the simple math. When you actually are much more involved in economics and know how it works through, you find that it's a much finer, a much smaller and more constrained number due to all the exceptions and things like that. And that's usually a lot of what happens. And in Jewish concepts, you present nice, simple formulas that say this is beautiful and so forth and so forth. But then when you apply it to the real world, it doesn't happen. Unless the only problem is sometimes you're so committed to wanting to happen, so you sort of stip it to make it happen. And then what happens out of that is other consequences, which are problematic.
Well, there's no question it's a complex issue.
Right.
And,
there's no doubt.
Okay, so better the word is complex than than deep or depth.
Well, I think depth is an indication of complexity because you recognize what I mean by depth. You recognize it's much more. it takes more intensity to really understand what's happening.
More involvement, more understanding.
Right,
absolutely.
Exactly.
So I think what sometimes happens, you had mentioned certain kiruv groups, you'll have people that sort of came in attracted to sort of, the passion and sort of some of the simplistic
It could be the feel-good experience. It could be just, I want to be like my neighbor, and I've had a good time with them, and they're nice people. It could be
or
I'm searching for a void. Or,
but then they'll have a challenge in life, and they've gotten used to a caricature of Judaism.
It also becomes something different also.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the fact is even in terms of the values of Judaism, you take the concept of chesed, which everyone loves in terms of chesed, helping out people, do things like that. I have an article on my website called The Evil of Chesed. And you also see it in terms of the stories of Yitzchak Avinu. There's a certain point in time where chesed is the wrong thing to do. Okay, even though it's wonderful and so forth, so forth. Or even let's say you talk in terms of outreach. There's a certain point in time where you cannot be welcoming. You just can't. And usually what occurs in real life is real intensity of situations. I just put up on the blog a case that a shaila was asked of me by a woman about she had a terrible accident when she was a young adult, late teens, early 20s, and she had two friends who sort of helped her out through this terrible time in the hospital, then was recuperating, stuff like that. And one of them was a guy who was gay. It turned out that years later, she was married, she was firm now, and so forth and so forth. Ontario now had gay same-sex marriages. This gay individual invited her to his wedding, which to him was a big deal. And she was invited. And the dilemma was, can she go or not? Should she go? Whatever that. And her husband said, no, you can't go because you'll be giving acquiescence to a gay marriage. But they said but they both agreed they should ask me the question. The point was, as I said, I understand the dilemma. The dilemma was that here's an aspect of a keres tov, and here's an aspect of acknowledging the person. Yeah, you don't disagree with his lifestyle, you don't. But on the other hand, this is a person that stood beside you. So how do you turn him and just say, I don't care? How do you deal with it? So it was a dilemma. Now, in the end, I basically, advised her not to go because of another aspect, because he seemed to have become a little bit more. He was getting interested in some aspects of Torah and keeping Shabbos and so on and so forth. So the marriage was patterned after a Torah marriage. So when I heard that, and when I heard a lot of that, I felt that was an issue that would basically, ended the issue. She couldn't go because it would be a mockery of Jewish values. Because, like I saw today, for example, there was a same-sex marriage done with quote-unquote under the guise of Orthodoxy. Two guys, both wearing kittles and stuff like that.
Okay.
I just saw the YouTube video, and to me, it was absolutely bothersome, really bothersome. Listen, you want to go and do what you want to do. It's between you and God. But if you want to make a mockery of and there's a classic example of that in halacha is saying a bracha on tray food. Okay, it's considered to be a zilzal. The fact is that here you are eating something God says not to eat, and you want to make a bracha. It's really flies in the face of it and so forth. So therefore, that was that situation. But the point is just seeing the complexity of life. Okay. And the depth of the situation.
I have several questions now.
Yeah.
First of all, if it's pikuach nefesh, do you make the bracha on the food?
That's actually a machlokas in the Meforshim.
Interesting. Second, regarding same-sex marriage, I heard something not long ago that although the marriage could take place. It's a marriage not necessarily, call it, consummated. In other words, there's...
Not from a halachic perspective.
Pardon?
Not from a halachic perspective.
Agreed. No, I'm not talking about sanctioning.
Okay.
I'm talking about the marriage taking place with both individuals agreeing not to have gay sex.
Okay. To look at the Jewish view of same-sex marriage, consider a father marrying a daughter. Okay, would you say it's okay as a father to marry a daughter?
I'm trying to think of examples that I might know of from Torah, and of course I don't know any.
Would you think it's okay
I would assume not.
Okay, so I mean the fact is that from halakha perspective, the kedushin are not tosin. There's no marriage. It's like a married woman marrying another guy. There's no marriage. Okay, so the point is that it's not acceptable. It's just not a marriage. The truth is the person who officiated that marriage was a guy named Steve Greenberg, who was a Muslim from YU and has been known as the Orthodox gay rabbi. And he himself says, well, it's not really a kedushin, it's a commitment, whatever it was. That's something that's not my issue. What I'm just trying to point out is that there are complexities. This woman basically asks a question of complexities, and that's often lost in many ideas. When we talk about depth, it talks about the fact that there are tensions. There are times where you can't do chesed. There are times where you have to take care of yourself. And that's one of the tensions that exists in halacha of what really defines a good person. And sometimes when you present simplistic answers of the good, you forget the depth of the human experience and the fact that the Torah is really dealing with a much more complex recognition of the tensions of existence and so forth. And it's not so simple to make those decisions.
Have you seen the recent video on how not to do Bikur Cholim?
Yes. I mean that's an example. There's a video.
This is a YouTube video
on how not to do Bikur Cholim, and basically it's like it's a joke. It's comedic, but basically it shows a person showing no sensitivity to the cholim. But the truth is that what's sadder is someone coming to Menachem Abel and talking about how, let's say, a child dies, and they come to Menachem Abel of a parent. Kadosh Baruch Hu must have loved the baby.
What people have been brought up to say.
Okay, and you're looking at this and saying,
societal, but it's unfortunate.
But you're looking at the fact is that, and because it's the tension of Nichum Avelim is, well, death is supposed to cause sadness, okay, and the concept that there is a tension in the sense that this person is now with God, so why are you sad? And the perception of that. But the fact is we are sad, and there's a sadness involved over here. So the truth is that there's a tension in that regard of how you really relate to this type of issue. And all I'm saying is by sort of, as this a prelude to getting into the issues of women in Judaism, is that there is a lot of simplistic information that's presented, simplistic arguments presented, that seem nice on the side, like women don't need these mitzvahs because they're already they're closer to God.
Oh yes, spiritual.
Yeah, right. They don't need these commandments and so forth. And the fact is what exactly does that mean? And it's a nice little perception and so forth. Like, anyways, that's not. It's a matter of really trying to understand the depth of the situation, and that's really what I think is what I'm going to get to. The gender in Judaism, the real issue, is understanding what the real issue is perhaps the first step in trying to understand the complexity and the depth of what this issue is. The fact is that it comes down to a simple reality, somehow the Torah makes a distinction between men and women in terms of the law. Okay? And what we have to deal with is, what does this distinction mean? Okay? Now, one simple answer is, why? Distinctions just exist. Why does, maybe they just exist. It doesn't have to have any meaning. It's just things, Even in the most extreme, you say it's arbitrary. You're saying, hey, blondes have to go through the left door and brunettes have to go through the right door. Why? Because they said so. I mean, obviously it sounds very, very, very sort of cursory and sort of, like I said, arbitrary. But the point is what you're seeing is a distinction. And the real question is, what is that distinction, or what is the meaning of the distinction? And there's two real issues of that, and that is understanding what the distinction really is, and then understanding what may be the philosophical concepts from that distinction that may have extra legal implications in terms of hashkafa. In a sense, what happens in terms of any philosophical concept in Judaism, because of the concept of the Fnim Meshuras Adin, there's a concept. Sorry, I'm just. But in terms of the Fnim Meshuras Adin, there's a concept of this idea that you learn from the halachas and you play it, like kadoshim to you. So obviously you have to come up with a keep having to do this off. Okay. This person's going to keep calling you to see this. Okay, and here we are being videotaped here. But the fact is that I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about extra legal
right.
concepts.
So the fact is, you come up with the extra legal concepts and so forth. Therefore, here's an idea: men and women are distinguished in law. What exactly is the nature of that distinction? What are the application of the distinction? What is the extent of that distinction? Those are halachic issues in terms of understanding gender distinctions in halacha. And then, what are the distinctions beyond the idea? The starting point, though, especially in our world today, is the very idea of distinctions. Okay, we live in a world where there's a general perception that men and women are not are similar. Okay, except for certain body parts. But there's a real attempt to say, no, men and women are different. No, they are the same. So the point is you look at them and say, well, this woman got 100 on this test. So you can't say women can't think for this area, because there's a woman over there who did very well in her test or whatever. So the point is that if you take a certain analysis of what are those distinctions, it's very, very hard to define those distinctions. So therefore, the starting point is the very nature of that distinction. Now, but the starting point from law. Okay. The starting point is from law of that nature of that distinction. So we have to figure out what exactly is the nature of that distinction, what is the next distinction applicable, and so forth. Okay. Now, and the question there is the distinction justifiable? So if I say men have rights, women don't have rights, why shouldn't women have rights? And whatever reason that is, you have to find a justifiable reason, or is it just something they made up? The fact is, though, is at this point in time we get the second aspect of where, I mean, that's a general question of any distinction between men and women in general society. And what we basically have moved towards is there's distinctions based upon individuals. In other words, if you're not smart enough to be a doctor, you're not a doctor. But the point is that if you want to tell me that you do all, that it turns out, now obviously the truth is that there's more women entering med school these days than men, and more women entering med school. But if you wanted to say, hey, women should not enter into medical school because women are not as smart as men in the health sciences, good, so just, you don't have to have any statement like that, just give the test, and you'll see all the women will fail out, and that's it. So that's what's really what happened here. And then you see that it didn't even stand up because women are doing just as well. The only thing in Judaism that makes it distinct is, I'm going to have to take a break and tell this person stop calling. Just keep it going for a sec. Hello? Yeah, I'm in the middle of shir. I have to call you back. Bye-bye. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, sorry for that pause. All you people in kosher too. Okay. The fact is that a difference in halacha is not one of rights, but of responsibilities. In our world today, basically we say women can't do this, or the perception was women could not vote, or could not do, in other words, women were fighting for rights. In the halacha, it doesn't start with rights, it starts with responsibilities. So it's a very different phase over here. In other words, how are men and women distinct from a Jewish perspective? First of all, the distinction itself raises the problem, and the second is the distinction is not in terms of rights, but in terms of responsibilities.
Isn't it in terms of both rights and responsibilities when you get to things like inheritance laws and so on?
The fact is, it starts with responsibilities. Yeah. There are certain rights, so as you said, with the inheritance laws, but the fact is, it really starts with a certain concept of responsibilities. In the sense that, for example, let's say a woman can't be a judge. It starts with the concept that a woman can't be a witness. Okay, so we see women can't be witnesses. Right? People don't recognize that under halachic law, you don't have a right to be a witness, you have a responsibility to witness. So therefore, if you see a crime under halacha, you have a responsibility to go and report it. If there's two witnesses, whatever, but the job of witnessing in halacha, definition of witnessing, is responsibility. So when you say women can't be witnesses, what you're really saying is women do not have the responsibility to have to be witnesses.
But now, if they see something...
But the fact is once you don't have the responsibility, then the way it's defined is you don't have rights. You know, the right. But that's a unique nature of Jewish law. What usually happens is it creates a whole variety of new perspectives. Mm-hmm. See, for example, Aaron HaKohen and Moshe Rabbeinu came as witnesses, right? They can't be witnesses. Now you think about this. In our law, if you have let's say the brother of the defendant, you put him on up there to give testimony, and then the other attorney says, the prosecutor says, by the way, this is this guy's brother. Okay, so recognize, he cares about them, so forth and so forth. This is this guy's brother, and so forth and so forth. So it's up to the jury to determine whether I believe him, don't believe him, given the fact that there's a reason not to believe him. The same way, if a guy's a crook, put him up as testimony. Guy goes, then the prosecutor is able to say, I just want everyone to know that he's now serving time for fraud. It's his fourth conviction of fraud, and so forth and so forth. Jury can look at him and say, well, you know something? Maybe the guy's a con man, and maybe he knows how to give good testimony. The truth is that's where in halacha it doesn't work that way. Halacha is you have a responsibility to testimony. If you don't have a responsibility, you can't give testimony. Therefore, Aaron and Moshe can't give testimony because they're two brothers. Okay, so the fact is, it's a very different world to apply with. So the starting point, why can't a woman be a judge? Because generally, in order to be a judge, you have to be able to be a witness, and to be able to be a witness is the question: do you have the responsibility to be a witness? Women were exempted from the responsibility to be witnesses.
All right, question, and just to slice the word judge properly, Devorah.
Okay, so that's where you get into issues. How is Devorah a judge? So the truth is that there is a Tosfos that says a woman can be a judge. Usually we say if you can't be a witness, you can't be a judge. So there's an argument to say that vis-a-vis women, because it's one minority opinion in Tosfos. Generally, what most people understand is Devorah was not the final judge. She was sort of there listening to the testimony, and then the judges would sort of say, what do you think? And she would give over her arguments and thoughts and so forth and so forth. The judges say, "Okay, it sounds good to me," and they bow to her wisdom. Okay, but she was not officially the judge. Okay, that's where I think most Mephoshim understand what happened there. But the fact is it starts with a very different perspective in terms of responsibilities. Now, there are some rights you mentioned in terms of inheritance and so on and so forth, but generally it does start with responsibilities. But that creates a very different perspective. So the starting point is, why should gender make a distinction? That's a classic question. Okay? Why should gender make a distinction? But the uniqueness in Jewish perspective is that gender makes a distinction in terms of responsibilities, not rights, with consequences to rights. Okay? And that's the way that women are not mechuyev in this. Right? They're not commanded in this. Men are commanded in this. Now, if you think about that, you can say that basically the discrimination is against men. You know? Men have to go to shul. We don't have to. Men have to do this. We don't have to. Men have to do that. So we don't talk that way. Right? People don't feel it because there seems to be a value in having those responsibilities. The underlying question is, why is it that you have values in having responsibilities? And that's really what the difficulty is. So you basically have to, having this, but really the starting point is trying to figure out what that gender distinction is. I sort of started a few years back doing a lot of work on the subject. And the way I wanted to approach it was not to look at anything that was in the news nowadays, but to look at something just from a pure halachic perspective and see if you can come up with theories from looking just at halacha. And I wanted to go through the mitzvot. And I looked at the first mitzvah of Puravu. Okay? The truth is, if you start with the first mitzvah of Puravu, of having kids, and you go to the second mitzvah of Mila, right? In terms of circumcision, already in those two mitzvahs, you already are understanding the depth of the issue. When I asked that question about Mila, I mean, the simple answer is, why aren't women mechuyev in Mila? So the simple answer is, well, doesn't apply. Then what's the further question? The further question is, so why did God not create a need for Mila in women? Right? Because you're dealing with God. Right? So the question is, and this is a mistake a lot of people make in terms of understanding Judaism and understanding a lot of philosophy from a religious perspective. It's one thing to say the world is the way it is, and the law does this for the world. In other words, you need this law because the world is like this. Right? That's the sociological reason for the law. That's a secular reason for the law. The point is the world is like this because God created the world that way. The law, therefore, is like that because God created the world to necessitate this law. Right? So it's not enough to say women don't have circumcision because they don't have a circumcisable part. The fact is that's not enough. Why don't they have that? Okay, so that becomes part of the issue. So you're talking in terms of God's perspective. In any answer you're giving, you have to recognize that the question further is why did God create man this way? Now, or human beings this way. Now, the point I start with Puravu is because Puravu, I think, is a remarkably good place to look at the real issues involved over here. Because in order to have a kid, you need a man and a woman. Seems to be a pretty strong given. Okay? So the fact is, if you say in terms of procreation, men are obligated, the men have the mitzvah of having children, women don't have the mitzvah of having children, and you just leave it like that, then basically you're going to sit there and say, well, what does that mean? Because generally you need both of them together to have kids. So the man can't have it in order for a man to have mitzvah. So you can always say, yeah, there's one or two exceptions. If a woman wants to not have kids, she can decide to opt out. But it seems to be that there's a general presumption that most women will want to have kids. So how do you talk about that so why aren't they obligated? So what does it mean that you're not obligated? Usually if people aren't obligated, if you're not obligated, it means, okay, I don't have to do that. Over here, you're not obligated, but you're going to do it anyways, 95% of the time. Right.
The way that I learned it is that it was nigh unto impossible to ask a woman to put herself in a place of sakana,
right,
where she could ultimately die.
Right. So that's the answer of the Meshech Chachma. Okay, and obviously Meshech Chachma was a big gadol and so forth and so forth. But you understand the consequences of Meshech Chachma's idea. It's wrong for God to ask a woman to put herself, to command a woman to put herself in a situation that was life-threatening. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, I'm questioning it now, because how can anything be wrong for God?
Well, I mean, the fact is that generally we say He doesn't give mitzvahs that are life-threatening. One exception might be there are mitzvahs of war. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's life-threatening, and God does give some mitzvahs that are life-threatening. Yeah. There's also Mila. People can lose life, so God doesn't. But there is a general concept God doesn't want to give life-threatening. But think about what you're saying. God says to women, I'm not going to give you a commandment because it's life-threatening. Think of what you're saying.
But I guess we're saying at the same time that God would have created a situation where women are wanting to do something that's going to be life-threatening anyways, and the men in their lives are going to be trying to persuade them to voluntarily do something.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about this, God's not going to, but He's going to command the men to put women in life-threatening situations. Right? Okay? Now think about that. Hey, we're not going to command the women to put themselves in life-threatening situations, but we're command men to put themselves in life-threatening situations, and also we're going to let women make that decision to put themselves in life-threatening situations without the protection of having a chiyuv mitzvah, an obligation of the mitzvah. So, like you're worrying about. Now, the truth of the matter is Moshe Feinstein actually, because of these reasons, says that really, and notwithstanding his way of learning, notwithstanding the famous Mishnah well, actually he says this is what the Mishnah really means. He says, obviously, childbirth cannot be life-threatening, because since women do put themselves in this situation, there's a mitzvah on the man to put the woman in this situation, Moshe says that it can't be that childbirth is really life-threatening.
It's been proven otherwise.
So what is it? So that's why the Mishnah says that the reason that women die in childbirth is because they didn't do certain mitzvahs. They were makbid in Nida, they were makbid in Neros, they were makbid, I think, in Meisers as well, right? So the point is
but nobody can establish that causal reality.
I understand it, but what he's saying is that's why it's so emphatic for the Mishnah to say that it had to be in Avera, because the natural concept of childbirth, it should not be life-threatening. Only it's the fact of an Avera that makes a possibility for childbirth to become life-threatening. Why? Because God cannot command. It would be inappropriate to put a man, to tell a man to do something that's life-threatening to his wife. So the point is that what's happening is I'm not dealing with the actual practical. I'm dealing with the theoretical here. Mm-hmm. Okay, obviously, Moshe says it's a kind of stafashis and Yimachal Shabbos for you get the woman to the hospital and so on and so forth. But what he's saying is he's dealing with on a theoretical level that at its core thought in terms of don't forget, the Avera can change everything. So Vera says, but he's saying that there's actual derech hateva and there's Avera's working on derech hateva. Okay. But he's saying that from derech hateva, the perfect derech hateva, right? It's like if you put your head underwater, you'll die. Okay, if you keep your head submerged underwater, right, and then eventually, why? Because human beings need air. Mm-hmm. Okay, That's just regular derech hateva, that's reality, and so forth and so forth. Now, the point is that there's a question of averas and so forth and so forth. What he's saying is that I'm not saying childbirth is similar to a woman to putting your head underwater. In other words, I'm not. That's not the comparison. What I'm saying is that childbirth can go wrong because averas can mix up.
So you're making a comparison based in Devarim where men are asked if they are ready to go out to war, and they opt out because war places them in a sakana situation where their averot could lead to their death.
In war, it's a little bit more.
Yes.
Because the fact of the matter is over there in war, it's a question. You see what happens over there. It's actually also going to war because it's a mitzvah to go to war. So therefore, there's the other side of it that you're going to war because of the mitzvah. So therefore, the mitzvah should protect against you. But the truth is,
but there are two kinds of war. There's milchamet mitzvah and
even milchamet rishus is because the Melech wants it. There was some arguments that it's still a mitzvah to follow the Melech.
Understood.
And you have the rishus of the Sanhedrin and so forth and so forth. The Navi's behind it. So the milchamet rishus are not exactly, hey, it's your choice. It seems to be God's on your side a little bit. But the point is you're right. You're saying that's why if you're afraid that your averas will mess up, it will do that. But the point here is a little bit more where you can't really see that it's the averas because. But in a war, it's much more that it's in war. It's almost like. This is really a life-threatening situation, so averas can really play a role in that. But the fact is Ramosha's just saying, and the truth is what you said was the same thing as a Mesher Chachma. Ramosha says it gives another perspective on it. Mm-hmm. But the point is that I want to show.
And this is the tension, obviously. So
what I want to show is that when you throw out these answers, what exactly are you saying? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So with Rav Moshe's point of view, I mean, does that lead to sort of a practical implication where some poor woman's in the middle of dying of childbirth and people around her saying, oh, well, she must have been some kind of sinner?
Absolutely not.
God forbid. No, you can't establish a causal reality because we can never know.
So crazy offensive.
Agree.
But Rav Moshe is saying, the truth is that that's exactly it. But on the other hand, the answers that are given, the other like the answers that are given that, well, women want to have kids anyway, so they don't need the mitzvah. What the heck does that mean? Mitzvahs only apply when you don't have the desire to do it anyways. Is that the way mitzvahs work? Mitzvahs only apply when you don't have the desire to do it anyways? I'm not sure if that's true. Mm-hmm. Is it really true that so there's these mythologies made up that I know a lot of people who want to have kids and without mitzvah and the mitzvah is more. And not only that, there's a famous Rashi in Makos that says that one of the things is the famous thing everyone says whenever you ever see him, there's always a line it says. God wanted to benefit the Jewish people, so He created more Torah and mitzvahs, right? Okay. So the question, and that's a mission of Makos. It's a mission that when they do Avot, they say that mission at the end of every chapter of Avot. When they do Avot during the Omer time. The only problem is if you have more mitzvahs, you have more chances of botching up also. So a lot of the Meforshim say that you have to work out what that means. That how it's always positive to have more mitzvahs. So Rashi's answer is he gives you more mitzvahs of what you're going to do anyways. In other words, there's a mitzvah for you guys not to eat shratzim. Okay? In other words, it's usher for you guys to eat mosquitoes. Now, how many of you are running out to eat a mosquito? You get a mitzvah for not eating mosquitoes, right? That's what it means. In other words, God gave you mitzvahs you're going to do anyways. It's like saying, hey, there's a mitzvah to breathe. Great. The truth is, this is the way Rashi understood it. He actually says it's by Trefus. He says his exact language is by Trefus. It's like he says, listen, I was going to eat that stuff anyways, but there's a mitzvah so He gives you mitzvahs you're going to do anyway. So that's true. So He gave mitzvahs for you to so what do you mean He didn't give mitzvahs to women because they already want to have kids? Why? because other mitzvahs because they already on it. And is it really true all women don't have kids? Is it really true that if you take a percentage that more women want to have kids than men want to have kids and stuff like that? The truth is that a lot of these reasons are problematic. But in terms of working this out. But the starting point of understanding it is the fact that you're speaking to these two people, you're seeing these two groups. There are two groups where you cannot point to anything physical that indicates why one should be obligated on one should be, because they're both necessary in order to have kids. So therefore, you're saying to them, hey, you're both necessary to have kids. Okay, you're obligated to have a kid. You're not obligated to have kids. Okay, it's like a football team. Okay, I'm not going to obligate the blockers in doing anything. The running backs have to run with the ball, but they can't run unless they have their blockers leading them. Well,
however, the subcontract is.
And then it gets into issues where. Now the truth is, then they start working with ideas. Well, there is a distinction with them physically, and the fact is that it's much more of an issue for women having children, and it's much more of an invasion of their bodies and stuff like that, right? So that could have consequences and so forth. So the truth is the Gemara in Yevamos goes through a case like that, where it was a lot easier for a woman to say, "Listen, I've had enough kids," because the husband can have more than one wife, anyways. In a world where men can only have one wife, then it becomes obligated, almost the same obligation on a woman as on the man, because the man can't do it without the woman. So it's a little bit of an issue. So these are all very, very intense issues that really get to the root of it. But the point is that the simplistic answers that are presented are just so they sound nice. They sound really, really nice. Oh, women are like this and men are like this and so forth and so forth, and it doesn't work. And you go through a lot of these things, like why is it that like the mitzvah says as mangrama, women are not obligated in commands that are time oriented. Okay. Look at it. How many mitzvahs are women not mechuyev in? Okay.
Works out to almost about half.
Well, no. In terms of mitzvahs, says non-gram. Okay. How many mitzvahs are women not mechuyev in? It's about like 6 or 7. And of those mitzvahs women are not mechuyev in, not obligated in, how much would it affect their rearing of children? They're not mechuyev in Shema. How long does it take to? Oh, they are mechuyev according to the Rambam in davening, and according to everyone, they're mechuyev according to Magen Avraham, other people they're mechuyev in Shachris and Mincha, right? But they're not mechuyev in Shema. So let me understand. They're mechuyev to say Shmona Esrei 2 times a day, right? At least rabbinically, but they're not obligated to say a paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Discuss.
Okay, discuss. They're not mechuyev to take lulav and esrog, right? They're mechuyev in going to hear Kriyas Megillah. I'm telling you, women have to work out their babysitting for Kriyas Megillah. They'd rather say, "Listen, I'm going to CHABURA and do the lulav and esrog. Take me 2 seconds." I mean, what does that mean?
Megillah takes 18 minutes, even Rabbi Bulka.
Right. But not only that, the point is that, so let them not be obligated to taking care of kids. Why should a single woman be exempt? And there are distinctions in mitzvahs that we make when women get married. Like the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em changes the woman's responsibilities for her home. Like, for example, her responsibilities for her family override the responsibilities of kibbud av v'em. So why don't you say, listen, before she's married, she's mechuyev taking lulav and esrog. Once she's married, the fact is that the actual constructs of the law are pretty straightforward. The point is that we can come up with simplistic answers. And these simplistic answers really they sound nice on the surface, but the truth is what are the actual applications? What does it mean?
Well, what's the logic if you say that women aren't bound by these time-bound commandments to then make 2 of the 3 big mitzvot for women, lighting the Shabbat candles and mikveh, are incredibly time-bound. I mean, I don't know any Jewish woman who isn't madly rushing around
or organizing, or doing something,
sort of getting in the nick of time lighting of the Shabbos candles. I know I am, and trying to when the mikvah's only open in the evening and your kids are here and trying to wait for someone to get. It's always a mad time.
It's a very interesting thing. You with just as an aside, the humor. Years ago, a friend of mine was the Hill director at University of Toronto, and he was being bugged by one of the divinity colleges at University of Toronto to have some kind of session with a rabbi, like one of their profs, obviously a minister prof, and a rabbi, and try and work out this like that, to try and do it. And he kept putting it off. So finally, one day he said, he asked me if I would do it. So I sort of. I said, okay, we'll do it. We'll have some fun. And the truth is they wanted him to bring some Jewish people along. The truth is that it was me and this minister and a bunch of divinity students. Want to get a Jewish perspective. So and there were a couple of things that hit me about that experience. One was we were talking about the CHABURA, Adam and Eve, and the guy who organized it in Jerusalem, and we're talking about this, and I just sort of maneuvered the I said, you guys do recognize that the word sin is not found in the story of the Eitzadas at all. The first time the word Hecht appears in Chumash is in the story of Cain and Hevel. Okay, it's not there at all. And there was this guy who actually calls me and said, what? The word sin? I mean, original sin, was it? The word sin is not there?
No.
And he's looking at me, and he looks at the minister and says, is that true, sir? Like I felt like I just destroyed this. Is that true, sir? And the guy, the prof, very nonchalant. He says, yes, the concept of original sin is a policy in the understanding of the text, and the word sin is not found in the. Like very matter of factly. I felt like this guy was totally. That was one thing I remembered from that. But the other thing I remembered is at the end, they wanted to give me a present for coming and speaking to them, right? Okay, so what did they give me? They gave me an interfaith calendar.
Oh, there you go.
What it was, it basically was the same picture 12 times. What do you mean the same picture 12 times? It was basically a picture of a husband and wife and kids. It was a picture of the family, smiling nicely, and feeling that family spirit, and, the nice religious perception, family values, and so forth. It was the same picture with whatever icons you wanted from the religion. So one of the Christian pictures was around the Christmas tree. And this picture with Buddha had a little Buddha, the whole family sitting around. Obviously it was some type of event, the whole family nicely dressed, smiling as a family, the familial love and so on, all nicely dressed. What was the Jewish one? The Jewish one was the woman lighting Shabbos candles, the whole family nicely dressed for the lighting of the candles, so forth and so forth. So I showed this picture. I say, this is a picture that I have never seen exist in the Jewish home.
Yeah, no kidding.
Who has ever seen when the woman's lighting Shabbos candles, the family
gathered around, we're just ready for the picture.
Right. Yeah, I know what it's like in my home. You like this? Yeah, come on, let's go. Let's get going. Yeah, right.
Turn off the oven.
Right. Exactly. So the fact is that I got a kick out of that. Okay. Anyways, that's what he said. The truth is that what you're saying is very interesting. Of course, the lighting of Shabbos candles has really it has become the woman's mitzvah, but it's not really. Specifically women's, it's a mitzvah on all people to have light in the home and so forth. But what you're pointing out is that the simplistic answer for saying mitzvah says Shazman Grama, that Tamir, doesn't really work. It doesn't apply to Shabbos, right? It doesn't really apply to Yontiv. There's a whole question like this and so forth and so forth. The point is that, there's a whole variety of issues. So then you have to deal with, but there is a distinction. And that distinction, it creates there's a necessity of investigating the reason for distinction, but the point is when you take it out of its simplistic motif and the nice answers that are given over there to someone, oh, that makes so much sense, and yeah, and take care of the kids and stuff like that. When you give those answers and people buy those answers, they work well. But when you really go under the scrutiny of what's happening, they don't really explain it. Okay, and they don't understand it. Like, for example, the Mila question. The Mila question is so fundamental. Okay, if you really think about it, the fact that women don't have something like Mila should be a real challenge. I mean, that should be something that really is bothersome. Because what's the whole idea of Mila? That you perfect yourself. So what are you saying? Women don't perfect themselves?
We're born perfect.
Okay, so the fact is, if you want to say you're born perfect, it's very nice. But the problem in Judaism, being born perfect, is an imperfection, right? Because it's a greater thing not to be born perfect than perfect yourself. So the fact that you're born perfect is actually a weakness.
Right.
So okay, no one recognizes that. Okay, the point is that this is where you get into the depth. But really, what it comes down to is that there is a distinction between gender. Now the thing that happens is that what happens, all these simplistic reasons, you're all trying to find reasons that sort of fit into you're trying to find reasons that can be somehow practically defended, right? It's the same way as saying I'm not going to have women go to medical school because they're not as smart as men. Then you find out women are just as smart, so why are they going to medical school? So then you find out, right, that they're doing something that women think differently than men. They may be just as good doctors, but somehow they get to the conclusion differently than men. Well, that hasn't really been worked out or whatever. But the point is, but there's some issues.
There's some research already demonstrating that. Yeah.
Exactly. The fact is what has happened in the general world is that the world really worked upon two genders. The world was built. Men and women were very, very distinct. Okay. What happened in the 60s was that distinction got blown apart. Mm-hmm. Okay, and said, listen, if you're going to say men and women are different, let them both do the same thing. And if they can't do it, they can't do it. So when you had a woman from the WNBA, I think it might have been what's her name? She's like she was one of the best women basketball players. Mm-hmm. So she was drafted by the NBA, and she was told, "Hey, listen, if you can make the team, you can make the team." She couldn't, not because she was a woman. Okay, the point is that the discrimination was proved, and if a woman does come around and can make it at some point in time, that's fine. But the fact is, we're not going to discriminate because you're a woman. We're going to discriminate based upon the facts. So the truth is when you start thinking like that, you're starting to say, okay, what are the real distinctions in the area?
You're looking at it from a natural law point of view.
Exactly. But the fact is that when you try to explain the halacha based upon theoretical natural law, women have this desire, this. The fact is, you start seeing that starts breaking down. Mm-hmm. But the point is, it has to come from a very different perspective. You're still trying to figure out, so why is there that distinction? And then, the fact is you have to understand that distinction begins with a statement of responsibility rather than right. It's very, very different in the sense that the whole Western world was women don't have this rights. In the halachic world, it's like you aren't obligated. And what does it mean to be obligated? And that becomes a major issue. Now, what occurs is this need to define. Now, what it goes back to is that you really have to get, so what really is the distinction between men and women, and you really have to go back to the issue of what really is humanity in a certain level. In other words, are we all human beings with some differences, or is the difference between men and women a little bit more intense than just we're all human beings? So it's almost like, is it men and women are like two separate creations? Or is it both human beings, but it's male and female? Now the truth is, with the animal kingdom, it says the horse was created, and God created male and female. In terms of men and women, Adam was created, and then Chava. It was two very separate acts of creation, even though Chava came from Adam or whatever. But the point is it seems to be two different separations. And the truth is, it has application in terms of the name. Naming animals as just the species, right? When it came to Chava, you named only this individual. So the Malbim says individual human beings are equal to species. We talk about the terms of hashgacha, providence, right? The animals have hashgacha plalit, which is divine providence over, this is the Rambam's theory, divine providence over, a lot of Rishonim talk like this, divine providence over the whole species. When we have hashgacha pratit, which is divine providence over the individuals. So Chava is really an individual, but the prototype of female, which seems to be a much more individualistic concept. So the truth is can you look at yourselves as humanity, or do you look at yourself as I am this person? And then there's a subgroup of this group which is women. So how distinct, it seems the distinction between men and women, is it we're humanity, we just have little differences, or is it really a much more powerful distinction? Okay, and that gets into certain philosophical issues. But there's another aspect also that comes about this. And that's something that a lot of people don't recognize. When you think in terms of responsibilities, you think in terms of mitzvot. What is the objective of mitzvot?
To do the will of Hashem.
Okay.
Perfection.
Perfection, right? Okay. Okay, on the simple level, the sirens, the brias, to perfect human beings, to do something like that. So already you have to understand something. It's distinct. When you talk in terms of rights, you're saying that this law distinguishes based upon based upon the nature of people and the distinction that exists already. In other words, you're not going to have, let's say, okay, your IQ is 100, your IQ is 120. You're going to medical school, you're not, because we have a distinction based upon who you are today of what you can do. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that once you talk about mitzvot are not talking about where you are today, it's talking about what God wants you to be. Mm-hmm. So there's a possibility to start thinking in terms of mitzvot of not representative of the distinction that already exists, but a distinction in terms of objective. Now, the question then exists is, so why does God want to have a different objective for men and for women? And why that objective has to be defined by gender? But that's another aspect about this. In other words, when you start thinking in terms of responsibilities versus rights, then it's a different perspective in terms of that idea. But the fact is anyways, that's another aspect of distinction which a lot of people don't recognize. So basically what I'm pointing out is that if you really look at this from a halachic perspective, a lot of the answers that are generally presented are simplistic. They're simplistic because the issues are very deep. They're simplistic because they try to deal with simplistic aspects of nature. And they're trying to also work from a generic perspective of why don't women have these rights? Well, they don't need them, or they do. But when you look at it from a halachic perspective, which thinks in terms of obligations and trying to create a difference, okay, and also with very subtle distinctions between them, or basically trying to look and say what is really the difference? What is that difference? It's much tougher to define it. You end up with a much more complex model, which doesn't really lend itself to simple answers, but and actually makes some of the issues much more difficult to work with. I mean, you really find difficulties. That's one of the reasons, let's say, in terms of women involved in the liturgy, right? Everyone looks at them and say, well, she can daven just as good as anyone else. She can read Megillah as good as anyone else. Read the Torah as good as anyone else. And so forth and so forth. And she's just as good as anyone else. The bottom line is that the reason women don't have the chiyuv obviously has nothing to do with that. Right? It's not because of this and that. It's because there is some other type of reasoning there, which is much more difficult to figure out. Yeah.
Although I agree with that, I also look at modern versus more ancient times, and I'm not talking ancient, I'm talking, like 400, 500, 600 years ago.
Right.
And and you look at the level of education of women,
right,
which is completely different than it was
right,
so many hundreds of years ago. The capacity for women to learn alone has increased exponentially. And they have learned, and they have practiced, and they have the capacity to daven and learn and read and whatever. There are those who would say that it's time for a new sort of Beit Din to determine that it's okay, based on the idea that there is now education almost across the board that would not delimit or preclude any woman from learning, and the question then enters in, where does the tension begin in terms of going against the scholarship that has been in centuries before?
So I'm going to direct you to something.
Sure.
I just put up a new commentary on my website called Halachic Motivation. If you go to the Nishma website, www.nishma.org, on the home page there's a thing called columns, which has the web columns, and one of the web columns is commentaries, and I just put up a new one on halachic movement, and the issue of how does halachic move in terms of as the world moves and so forth and so forth. The issue emerges like this in a certain way. There's no doubt that the status of women have changed in the last 100 years, okay, in terms of them being more educated and them being more sensitive. The question is what are the consequences of that education? And that means you have to ask another question. You have to look back to the original halachos and say, were women excluded because they were perceived to be uneducated, or were women excluded for another reason?
Right.
In other words, like for example, it's quite possible with certain ideas, for example, that women was included as a group, right? Not because you were talking about individuals with female reproductive organs. You were talking about individuals who were uneducated. So therefore, uneducated individuals, but the generic term that was used was women because most women were in that category. So you have to make that distinction of when do you say that, when do you not say that, and where is that applicable. The point is, though, it seems that the liturgy is not one of those areas. It seems that you have that question in terms of let's say areas of knowledge may be something but is liturgy basically an area of knowledge? I don't think it was, even though there was aspects of knowledge, because you had to know definitely by heart and so forth and so forth. I don't think so. And the reason I say this is because, on the other hand, women were considered to be the models for tefillah. Chana was considered to be the model of tefillah, and that was to the biyachid. The truth is what's lost sight of is the fact the value of personal tefillah, and the fact is and this is another thing, is the communal tefillah and the perception people have of the role of the synagogue. Is that really the pure role of the synagogue? In certain ways, the Borough Park Synagogue, where it's Shabbos morning and I remember with my days in New York, staying with a friend for Shabbos and saying, okay, we gotta go make a minyan. So where are we going? Well, over there, CHABURA there. Walked into this place. Oh, we just missed Baruch here. Okay, we'll go over there. It was sort of like, and his mother just stayed at home. Right, she didn't go to shul.
There are women who do that today,
well,
even though they are educated.
Right, but that's the whole point. It's nothing to do with that. In fact, my wife personally likes davening at home. She finds it much more meaningful davening at home. A lot of people, find davening to be more intense at home. To go to shul
and you don't have the social distractions.
Right, exactly. So the again, turning it around. Men have the obligation to daven a minyan. Women don't have the obligation to daven a minyan, so they have the chance to actually pick davening at home. Okay, so you have more options to daven at home. So that's part of the issue as well. Okay.
In sort of, if I recall correctly, one of the explanations for why a woman or a minor couldn't be given certain aliyot was because of the honor of the congregation.
Right.
Is that possibly one of those areas that may have been influenced if you would give a woman who is sort of considered to be in an educated class that honor, would it sort of reflect badly on the men saying they're not even as educated as
one opinion.
Look,
is
Rashi's granddaughter, for example.
One opinion is that one opinion is that you're letting women. You're saying, hey, the fact that you're giving a woman aliyah, people may assume there's no man here who can do it, so it's really a dig, a busha to the men. So that's viewpoint. The fact is, Rashi by Devorah mentioned Devorah before. Rashi says Devorah, look how bad the Jewish people fell. Devorah had to be they had to go to a woman to be the shofet. Now the truth is that could be put into context in the sense that there's a certain level of education, and the point is that if you have to go to this person to sort of who's out of a certain class, I'm not getting into right or wrong, but he's saying that obviously Devorah was a great woman and so forth and so forth, but the point is that you see, like for example, Miriam was tremendously praised. But Moshe was around also. But if Miriam had to lead the Jewish people, it would be sort of saying, "Wow, there's no one else around." It's not like an attack in the sense of it's a much more subtle attack than saying, "Listen, if you're going to change from the normal way of doing things, there has to usually be a major distinction. In other words, if you basically keep getting some person doing certain people doing certain things and so on, all of a sudden you're turning around and saying, hey, we can't find someone from that group to do it anymore, it means that someone else must do it, then it must be, wow, that must really be. Basically it's a question of unbalance of probabilities. Men have to basically unbalance of probabilities to keep everyone equal. But if it's not balance of probabilities, then you have to make a distinction. So you're basically saying it's obviously it really means that there must have been an absence among the men, to really make that change, because that change was so abrupt. That's all. You know what I mean? It's a little. I'm trying to think of a good example. You see, again, it's an interesting thing because it's almost like reverse quotas in a certain way. If you want to make the point of a quota, then you specifically go and say, listen, we're not going by equality of life. We're going to say that we're going to pick this person because we're making a point. So on the other hand, if you're trying to say, listen, we want to keep things equal, but we can't do this, right?
Unless we specifically choose.
Right, but the fact is we didn't want to make a point of getting women. But the fact is it was so obvious there was no one in her category that we had to get. That really shows the men were totally a different category. It's like I'm saying, it's a reverse quota situation. It's like if you wanted to take a black into medical school to break the barriers, or put it another way, when Jackie Robinson broke in second base, you couldn't pick any guy. It had to be someone who was going to be a Hall of Famer. He may not have been the best second baseman. He didn't have to be necessarily the best. But he had to be someone up there because he was making a statement. So imagine the other way around. If basically you sort of said, hey, let's go get Jackie Robinson because there's no one around who can play second base. So it would look like, not that I want to make a statement, therefore I got Jackie Robinson, but you want to turn it the other way around and say, look how awful the white players must have been because they had to actually do something different and get a black player, then you understand the distinction. So it's not really an attack.
But then if you have more women who are capable in this generation than they were several generations ago, does that remove the push-up?
That becomes an issue that does exist nowadays. It's an issue that does exist, and that's why there's certain people who are advocating for aliyahs for women and so forth. But it's not so simple. There's further issues involved in this because is it only education that prevents the aliyahs or something else? The fact is that it may have something to do with the fact that, like for example, with my own personal perspective, I think that there's an overextension of the value of synagogue in our world today. Okay, and that's a Christian influence. So because of that, I'm very much in favor of advocating women learning Gemara and stuff like that, but I'm not such a major advocate on women in the liturgy because I think that there's an overextension of the significance given to synagogue in our world today, as that's where religion happens. It happens in the synagogue. And I think that that's somewhat of a problem.
It's an abdication on some level.
Well, because I don't want to say that the Judaism is in the home or something like that, but
no. Judaism is much more all-encompassing.
Right.
It's life. It's the home. It's the street. It's the school, and it is as well the synagogue. But it's only a component.
And the fact is, I think that what's happening is an overextension of that.
Well, it's a glorification.
Right. It's an overextension of it, and that bothers me. That bothers me, and so the fact is, on the other hand, while there's issues where a woman generally can't be a dayan, I think that it's quite okay for a woman to be a posek. Like that, and so forth and so forth. In other words, if you have a shaila.
All right. So now I've got a different question.
Yeah.
There was an article in the National Post that I just read before I came here, actually. I think it was in yesterday's paper. There's a theology school. It's actually a school that's part of U of T, and I believe it's initially Christian. However, a new part of this theology school is a yeshiva and rabbinical seminary. So here we are. Women are not going to be granted the title of rabbi, but they will be able to obtain a degree in.
So let's first of all understand something. I'm not going to go there for another reason. The distinctions between the branches in Judaism make the distinctions between the Christian sects pale in comparison. So the fact is, if you came up to me as a Methodist minister and asked me, hey, the Roman Catholics are doing that and the Mormons are doing that, I'll sit there and say, what does that have to do with me? Right? Now, I looked at that article actually, and there seems to be this trend that we shouldn't, we don't need distinctions anymore. We're all Jews. The fact of the matter is that's a misnomer and a misrepresentation. We are all Jews from a peoplehood aspect. We're all Jews from the definition. We do not share the same theology. And when you're talking in a yeshiva, you're talking theologies. Okay? So if you want me to sit down, that's why I'm very adamant about this. I generally do have some contact with non-Orthodox and stuff like that. But if you told me I was going to have a Torah discussion with a Reform rabbi, I tend to say, no, I will not be part of that, because that person does not see the book.
To the table from a different,
Totally different reference.
Completely different
To me, this book, in the same way I wouldn't have a discussion with a Christian about that. They're coming from a certain perspective, this book. I'm coming from a different perspective. You're reading the story one way, I'm reading the story a completely different way. And you say, well, the text doesn't say that. I don't really care what the text says. I have a frame of reference to the story. You have a frame of reference to the story. Maybe your frame of reference is limited to the text. My frame of reference is the text is only a small part of what really happened. So the point is I'm not willing to have those type of discussions. So the point is that it really bothered me, because there's this attitude of we're all Jews and so forth, and I find that really problematic, because there are theological distinctions. Okay, now, at the same point that this school is starting up, it's the Canadian Yeshiva Rabbinical School. It basically is founded by the right-wing conservative rabbis in the city, and the right-wing conservative rabbis in the city are an aberration within the conservative movement. The conservative movement is moved much more to the left down in the States. They're much more in the right-wing conservative movement, and because of that, they have certain acceptances of halachic standards within their perception of halachic standards. The fact is that they're now within that perspective, they are able to feel much more comfortable being a divinity school among other divinity schools associated with the University of Toronto. And that's why I read in that article, for example, they're going to be in one of the colleges there, St. Michael's, and the dean of St. Michael's, who's a nun, is going to sit on their board. It's very, very nice. But according to their theology, that's okay. My theology would say no, because my perception is that the faith of Judaism is qualitative distinctions of other faiths. I have a very strong attitude that Judaism is not about spirituality and faith the same way most religions are. So I know that when I sit down with people from other faiths, they have assumptions about me because as a rabbi I'm a man of the cloth and so forth and so forth. And sometimes I go along with them and I say so forth and so forth. But the fact is,
wool, sometimes it's linen.
But the fact is that I know that my mind process, my understanding of God is very, very different to them. Okay, so the point is that that's a distinction. So I read about that.
If I wanted to go and get my degree of
they won't give you a degree. They will.
They will give a degree. They will not give me rabbi.
So then,
let's say that's fine. Can I learn? What's it going to teach me about? What's the curriculum? I want to know that
but the truth
it's going to fit with me.
The truth is that everyone it's Gemara. The truth is that there's a theological bent, and you have to know the theological bent, and that theological bent is different. Anyways, I hope that I just wanted to throw out certain ideas about women in Judaism to show the complexity of the issue and the tension in looking at it.
I just want to ask, if it's your view that a woman can be a posek, is it necessary to be a rabbi to be a posek?
No. Obviously, because I say
well, you have
because I say a woman can be a posek. What I'm saying is basically all you need for psak is the ability, is the knowledge to answer that question, and perhaps you need to have someone saying, hey, listen, she has that knowledge. But the term Rav or rabbi is much more of a communal leadership issue, and that's where you get into some issues in terms of women and communal leadership. There's no doubt that Torah Judaism does limit the role of women in the community role. Now, why that's so, I again don't like a lot of the simplistic perceptions about that. But the fact is that there is some ideas about that, but it has to be worked out within the overall perspective. But obviously, if a woman's a knowledgeable woman, and the truth is that in a certain way, all psak is basically knowing what to do. Right? There's a lot of arguments that basically says everyone should really paskin for their own. It's not just, you have to ask the rabbi, paskin their own. if I
That's what you have Mishnah Berurah for, and many other sources.
But you
have to be able to know to
right.
learn.
But psak is beyond the Mishnah Berurah knowing how to make decisions, so forth and so forth.
Well, yes,
but the bottom line is that on a certain level, every Jew relies upon a woman's input in halacha, because if you're going to eat in most kitchens, most kosher kitchens, because usually the woman is in charge of that kitchen. So when a woman sits there and serves you the chicken and says it's kosher, effectively that woman is paskening for you, right? So when you have a guest over and you put down that plate of chicken and you say, hey, it's okay to eat that, effectively, what do you think a psak is? That's what it is. The truth is can women pasken? Well,
they do it all the time.
They're doing it all the time.